Welcome, everybody, today to 1990 Institute's inaugural Youth Symposium. We're just thrilled to have you here with us for a very exciting set of talks and discussions today. So as Grace mentioned, my name's Carolyn. I am going to be kicking off our very first session. It's entitled Trailblazers, Stories Beyond the Script. We're going to begin with a conversation that we believe really embodies the very spirit of trailblazing. It's going to be a panel discussion with 5 extraordinary individuals whose personal journeys have not only broken barriers, but have also built bridges and pathways for others behind them. Each of our speakers today have carved a path that challenges convention, uplifts their Asian identity, and redefines what leadership looks like. We're going to hear about the moments that shape them, the challenges they've faced, and the values that have guided them along the way. So it's a celebration of courage and authenticity, and we really hope that these stories are going to help you, the youth in the audience, really reflect upon your own voice and your own dreams and the incredible impact that you're all capable of making. So before we get started, just a bit of housekeeping. If we could just make sure everybody has their phones on silent. And we're going to start off with a moderated session that I'm going to facilitate, a bit of Q&A with each of the 5 speakers. And then we're going to open it up to live questions from the audience. So you'll see that we have a few mics that we're going to put in the aisles. So at that point, when I open it up, feel free to come down up to the speaker and wait to be called. So Andrew Chau, please come up to the stage. Andrew is the co-founder and CEO of Boba Guys and Tea People USA. Through his efforts, he's turned a beloved drink into a cultural movement. He's built one of the fastest growing independent retail chains in America. He spent his early part of his career building his marketing chops, as I call them, at companies like Target, Walmart, and Clorox. He co-founded and exited a digital imaging startup called Virgin's Media, and then started Boba Guys in 2011 and released his best-selling book, The Boba Book, in 2020. In 2022, he was recognized as one of Ernst & Young's prestigious Entrepreneurs of the Year. And Andrew received both his bachelor's degree and his MBA from UC Berkeley, just around the Bay at Cal. Welcome, Andrew. All right, next up, let's please meet Mina Fedor, founder of AAPI Youth Rising. Mina is a high school senior at College Preparatory School in Oakland. She launched her organization at 13 years old in an effort to combat anti-Asian hate. She's got over 200 chapters across 35 states. And she and her chapter leaders have been teaching their one day of AAPI history lesson in classrooms nationwide since 2021. They've reached over 50,000 schools and over 300,000 teachers, and their original lesson has been streamed over 10,000 times. She's earned widespread recognition for her efforts. She's had national TV coverage, honors from President Biden, and by the way, she's also a multiple-time Science Fair winner for her work in brain research. Welcome, Mina. All right, next up, Stephen. Stephen Kahn is the Other Bets Director at Alphabet, otherwise known to many of you as Google, parent company of Google. In his role, Stephen oversees investments in groundbreaking new ventures. So some of you guys may know Waymo here in the Bay Area, autonomous driving vehicle. That's one of their best-known examples in his business. He's been at Google for nearly 14 years, having previously led operations for Cloud AI, business development for Android and Chrome OS. He's done product marketing, venture capital, startup incubation, and outside of his day job, serves on multiple boards and mentors seed stage enterprise startups. So if you have a startup, you know who to go to after the event. He received his bachelor's degree in physics from Yale and an MBA from UCLA. Welcome, Stephen. All right. We are also very honored to have Julie Su with us today. Julie is a former acting Secretary of Labor under President Biden. She has spent her career fighting for workers' rights and immigrant justice. She spent her early days as a civil rights attorney and later served as the California Labor Secretary under Gavin Newsom. She spent nearly 2 decades as an attorney at the Asian Americans Advancing Justice in LA, served as California Labor Commissioner under Jerry Brown, and was awarded, pause for this, MacArthur Foundation's Genius Grant in 2001, and the Reebok International Human Rights Award in 1996. She has a bachelor's degree from Stanford, where she double majored in political science and economics, law degree from Harvard Law School. Welcome, Julie. All right, last but not least, let's give a warm welcome to Abigail Hingwin, best-selling author, film producer, director. Before becoming a novelist, Abigail spent 10 years on Capitol Hill as a law clerk and in private practice. She then built a successful career in Silicon Valley, working in AI policy, venture capital at Intel. Today, she's best known for bringing authentic Asian American stories to life across literature and film. Her debut novel, Love Boat Taipei, became a New York Times bestseller and was adapted into a Netflix movie called Love in Taipei, where she also served as executive producer. She's got a upcoming new middle grade debut novel, The Veil, got copies. Actually not released until September 16th, so everybody here has a very early sneak peek, lucky you, to be able to see that and listen to Abigail. She's got a bachelor's degree in government and international relations from Harvard, law degree from Columbia, MFA from Vermont College. I mean, this panel. Right? Welcome, Abigail. All right, we're going to get started now with the interactive portion of the panel. Like I said, I'm going to be teeing up questions for our panelists today, but we're going to have some time as well as the end for some live questions from the audience. So I'm going to start out with Abigail. Abigail, okay, you were born, I understand, in West Virginia, and you grew up in a small town called Solon, Ohio, which is just outside of Cleveland. The summer after your freshman year at Harvard, you attended a cultural immersion program called Qiantan, also known as the Overseas Chinese Youth Language Training and Study Tour, bit of a mouthful, but more famously known amongst Asian Americans of our generation as Love Boat. So I imagine, growing up Solon, Ohio, probably not too many Asians, and then going out to Love Boat. Tell us what that was like for you. How did you feel being in that environment with so many peers that looked like you, similar cultural background? What kind of experience was that?
Well, thank you. And thank you all for having me on this amazing panel, and for all of you for being here today. And there's so many things to do in the Bay Area, and the fact that you're all here wanting to get to know each other and get to know us, I think it's amazing. I definitely did not have this in Ohio growing up as a youth. We had the Organization of Chinese in Americas, and I think there were like 4 of us that were about the same age. So we would go to all the cultural events together and hang out together, and that was really what we had. So I'm just really thankful for being here and this opportunity for me to have healed from some of that. So Ohio, I think growing up as one of the few Asian Americans made me really aware of my identity because I was confronted with it all the time. People are always asking me, like, where are you from? Why do you look so different? Why did you bring this thermos of adobo chicken to school instead of sandwiches like the rest of us? And so I think I just was always aware, wow, I'm really somehow very different than all my classmates. And I didn't know that I was an immigrant kid. I don't know why I didn't know that, but I just did not understand that the reason I was different was my parents were from the Philippines and Indonesia, and my grandparents were from China. And actually, all my classmates had immigrant stories too. There was a girl whose family had been on the Mayflower, and I thought that was the coolest thing ever. It's just that I never read those stories about the journeys that my family took. So I just didn't know that they mattered or were important, or even, I don't think I even fully understood them. And so going on a program like Love Boat, where I met so many different Asian American youth who were so proud of being Asian American and who were in touch with pop culture and language and the food, like that was really transformative for me. And that's partly what I wanted to capture in the book Love Boat Taipei, which follows a journey of a girl from Ohio to Taipei to learn language and culture, but also ends up being a journey of cultural exploration and reconnecting with her heritage. And that was very much my experience.
How did you think about taking this very uniquely Asian American experience, right, that you experienced going from Ohio into Taiwan and being part of that immersion program? How did you take that and think about writing something that's going to appeal to a broader audience? Talk to us a little bit about that.
So I had actually been writing for 10 years before I published Love Boat Taipei, so there was no overnight success. I wrote and buried 5 novels, including this one. This was the last book I buried before Love Boat Taipei, and I'll talk about why I had to bury this one. It was just too early for its time. But when I was writing Love Boat Taipei, it was the first time I actually wrote a full Asian American girl protagonist. So The Veil actually features a kid who's Asian, but this is my first time writing a girl who was very similar to me, Asian American girl from Ohio. I didn't know she could be the main character for all those other books that I wrote. I didn't know that she was allowed to be the main character. And to be honest, like, she wasn't for many years. There was a girl who had written a book 15 years prior to me, and she had to change her character to a white character for her to get a publishing deal. And it's so hard to get a book deal. She did it. And she talked about how it was like taking a spoon to her heart, but that was the only way she could break in. So I'm really thankful things have changed, but it's taken a while. And even at the time Love Boat Taipei came out, I remember talking with different editors, and there was an Asian American editor who was really excited about the book, but she's like, I gave it to my white friend, and my white friend liked it too. And I sensed there was this insecurity in her. Like, she had been in the industry for so long, she'd been fighting for Asian American rights for so long, and she was really tired. And even with a book like Love Boat Taipei, she just wasn't sure, and she needed that validation from someone else. So I remember talking to my agent about it. I love this editor. I don't think she's the right one because she's insecure about this book. And to get to the New York Times bestseller list and to get to the movie screen, which is, we had those dreams even at the beginning, it would take a lot. But why did it resonate with so many people? I think, I didn't even know, but I think at the end it's by being really true to ourselves and telling the stories that only we can tell about our relationships with our families, our relationships with our friends, and our heritage, like all that. The more specific a story, the more actually that people can connect with it. And so it has been exciting to see it resonate. Now it's been translated into 12 or more languages and more coming, so.
It's an amazing success story, Abigail. Let's pick up on that thread of authenticity. I'm gonna shift gears here to Andrew. So he can tell us a little bit about his interesting journey to Boba King Mogul. So, interesting fact about Andrew, he initially studied pre-med in school before switching to sociology and business. And then you spent 13 years in consumer marketing at the big retail companies I mentioned earlier. And then I read that you started Boba Guys as a side hustle. So still working your corporate job, and like, well, let's try out this boba tea concept, and you were incubating it on the side, essentially. So tell us a little bit more about that decision. What was sort of the spark, the aha moment that led you to create the Boba Guys? And then tell us a little bit about what made you finally have the confidence to leave your corporate job to do that full time.
Yeah, well, thanks for that setup. First of all, thanks for having us. I realized I'm looking at, it didn't occur to me that there was gonna be so many parents with their children. So I'm probably gonna bounce back and forth between the audience. And the first thing I want to get out was really addressing the question. There's this idea of Asian excellence. I was hearing everyone's bio, and if I was a high school student sitting in the audience right now, I'd be like, I cannot. Yale, what? Berkeley, Stanford, a secretary, a New York Times bestseller, like an entrepreneur. So I want to just say, kind of my general theme is you have to be unapologetically who you are. So I was a pre-med. I went to Berkeley. They call it like MCB or IB out there. And so it's like a major. And then for me, I sat in conferences like this. I was someone who was kind of driven. My dad was a refugee. He was a freedom swimmer, if you knew that. So shout outs to Wes in the audience from Wong Fu, who I really look up to. So I really always looked into like storytelling. I always knew my culture, but I didn't know where to apply it. And as a pre-med and as a business person, you really are just kind of thinking about kind of like practical uses of your profession. So when I was a marketer, my job, as I learned, I used to make commercials, I used to make marketing campaigns. It was really to learn how to storytell. And growing up watching videos like Wong Fu, or now I would be reading like Love Boat Taipei, Abigail's books. But when I was in that kind of world, I was thinking, could I do a product? Could I do something that for me was very authentically or unapologetically me? And I did grow up in New Jersey, but I grew up also out here. I moved during middle school, and there was a set of companies that I really look up to. One was called Blue Bottle. You guys might know that. If you're too young to drink coffee, don't drink too much caffeine yet. Boba, guys, is okay caffeine, but not the other kind of caffeines. So I was having Blue Bottle and Phil's Coffee, which are also Bay Area products. And I was in grad school at this time. And in grad school, you always think about, you have a chance to reset, and you think about what's next. And so for me, I was like, what if I could do Asian Blue Bottle? And that's essentially what I said in the early interviews. I wanted to make it more artisanal, meaning like I was getting older. So I don't know if you guys know this, but ask your parents, like your metabolism, if you know what that is, it goes bad. So you can't have a lot of these same ingredients. And it's not to shade like dollar boba or anything, but I grew up on that. But I was like, I need to put a little bit like higher end ingredients in my body. But I love boba. So that's kind of how it all happened as a side hustle. So I think at the end of the day, like I'll probably answer in future questions, just be unapologetically who you are. It doesn't have to be boba. For me, it was kind of like in college, I was known to drink a lot of boba. And then I just never outgrew it. And then, but I had a business background, so I applied my technical skills with something I just really loved. So here I am.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. I think we have some similar themes running throughout our panel today, right? And I thank you, Andrew, for calling that out, that on paper, these bios can look extremely impressive, intimidating, potentially. You know, you might be feeling, especially if you're a student in the audience, how can I live up to something like that? But remember, we're all people. We all started somewhere. We all had interesting journeys along the way. And what we thought at 12 or 15 or 18, certainly I think for many of us, is not where we ended up. And though your life can take many twists and turns, and I think it is listening to those sparks, those aha moments, those things that bring you back to, you know, your childhood, your cultural identity, I think can also help shine a light as you move forward in your life and in your career. So again, you know, listen to the stories and hear how these panelists above us, in front of us today, listen to those mile markers and what they did about it and how they chose to live their lives. So maybe one more question, follow-up question for Andrew before we move on. One other interesting similarity to some of the folks here on the panel is that some of you started off in very traditional career paths and then broke away and did something very different. And I know that myself as an Asian American, maybe many of you in the audience, sometimes that can be scary. Sometimes you might have parental expectations around what a traditional path should look like, a stable path should look like. How did your parents react when you said, hey, I'm gonna quit my job and do boba full time?
I've said this in public before, and I kind of outed my mom for being a little bit too Taiwanese and a little bit of a tiger mom. But I think, the idea and the theme I could see is it comes off as Asian excellence, which I am very careful because I have a very young team. I have 500 employees or team members. But, not everyone's going to go after it the same intensity in the same way. And they all have different paths. So let's just look at the panel. We have everything from like writing to government and to future leader right here, future president. I've known Mina for 5 years. So I think when you think about how to just like pivot and grow and all that kind of stuff, I would say in your life, you're going to be pivoting your whole life. You're going to be evolving your whole life. They call it growth mindset, if you know what that is, right? So if you're always in a growth mindset, for me, yes, I was a corporate person, and then I went over to do something entrepreneurial. But I actually think that's just probably first or second act of my life. I'm still maybe halfway through my life, and I think I still got some, they call it second act. I still got some other ideas in me. Maybe I could lead, I could do more nonprofit stuff. So there's always, even if you think you're established, there's always going to be the next chapter. So I would say, Boba Guys was just, again, a natural extension outside of my corporate career. I do tell people, I don't want your parents to get mad at me when you guys drive home with them, is that I actually believe in corporate careers. I learned a lot of discipline. I learned a lot of just kind of rigor that I think if I started out as an entrepreneur, I wouldn't have had. I don't think Boba Guys would have made it had I just straight out became an entrepreneur. So your parents didn't tell me to say that. So I just think, everything happens for a reason. And so even though I did the pivot, I think a lot of people would probably, speak to like, you're just going to be the sum of all the prior experiences. And that just continues to compound. And from there, that's where you get your life path.
Great advice, Andrew. Thank you. Okay, Julie, we're going to move to you next. Also an interesting backstory. So you were born in Madison, Wisconsin, not that far from Abigail in a way, the middle of the U.S., had Asian immigrant parents. Your mother, unable to afford a ticket on a passenger ship, came to the U.S. on a cargo ship from China. Father's from Taiwan. Turn back the clock for us. You're growing up in Madison. What point did you make a decision to pursue a career in public service? What types of, early exposure or experiences that you had can you think of that might have influenced the path you had eventually decided to take?
Thank you, Carolyn, and joining my panelists and thanking them and thanking all of you for being here. So my own journey began in Wisconsin, but not for very long, because I think my parents were like, we just crossed continents and oceans to be in this country, and there's no reason anybody should be this cold. So they left Wisconsin and moved to California when I was pretty young. And opposite of Abigail's experience, I grew up in a community that was diverse. My parents were some of the first Chinese immigrants to move into Monterey Park. So in the 1970s, I have vague memories as a child of that transition, of people being angry about store signs in Chinese, about people not wanting Chinese language books in the public library. Now, if you know Monterey Park, you know that they kind of lost that fight. But we were part of that. We were part of that wave. And when I graduated from high school, the community that I grew up in was the most ethnically diverse in the entire country. There was an LA Times article about it. I took it with me to college. I pasted it on my wall. I talked to everyone who would listen to me about it. And I was shocked that there were Asian Americans who had come to Stanford and were like, oh my God, there's so many Asian Americans here. I was like, where did you grow up that that's your sad upbringing? Because I grew up in a diverse community that made me proud of who I was and that made me realize how important diversity is and was and would be throughout my life and my career, which is also why the attacks that we're seeing right now are so ridiculous to me. But I also, I want to say, I think this idea of like your own story being really important to who you are and who you become, I can't overemphasize enough what Andrew said. And I actually want to say something to the parents about that, because what Abigail said is that a lot of times we didn't know our stories growing up, even though we lived in homes that had lived those stories. And so for parents to share your stories with your child, even when they don't seem interested, even though you're just trying to get them to sit down and hopefully have a meal with you, I think if you share those stories, that actually is a really important part of that dynamic about letting them understand who we are. And so for me, the reason I went to law school is that I grew up translating for my parents. It's a very common experience among the children of immigrants. And as I grew up, I realized that law is really a language. And those who speak it get to decide who gets what in our society, right? Who gets citizenship, who gets to work, who gets to vote, who gets to marry and march and migrate and a whole host of other things. And I felt like one reason why people were being left out is because we needed more translators in that language of law. So I went to law school to become a translator in the language of law for people who'd been marginalized, discriminated against, and exploited. And when I started my career, again, to double down on the idea that none of us knows where we're going. I'm maybe the oldest person on this panel, and I'm in a period of like great transition after we lost the election and are now, I think there's always room for transition. But when I came out of law school, I wanted to work in the Asian American community. I wanted to be a public interest civil rights lawyer. And people in law school were like, okay, that's for people who can't cut it in the real world, right? That's for people who can't get the corporate jobs. the important. And so being willing to embrace what you want to do in the face of people who say you can't or shouldn't is really, really important. And had I not joined Stuart Quo, one of my mentors and one of our all-time community treasures, at an organization that he started, now called Asian Americans Advancing Justice, I would not be where I am today. Because it's there that I learned to fight for stuff that other people think don't matter, right? To use my now like command of this language of law to try to shape it in ways. And then not just to translate it from my community, but to translate the issues of my community back in and change the law and transform the law and make it relevant to us.
Julie, I want to pick up on something that you mentioned while you were telling us this story about how when you're in law school, you're surrounded by all these other very ambitious students. You're one of the top law schools in the country. Many of your peer students were pursuing careers in corporate law. How did you know that the path that you were on was the right one for you? How did you stay true to your ideals and what you wanted to do to defend your community while you're in that environment?
Yeah. So to be completely honest, I didn't. Right? I was pretty insecure about it. You're in an environment where everyone is saying this is the path, this is what you're supposed to do. I also, in my couple summers between law school, I worked at corporate law firms. It was what everybody did. It was how to show that you belonged. And when I got those first paychecks, my parents were so happy about it that my very first summer associate, I'm not a part-time lawyer, summer associate paycheck, they kept on a table in our home for a couple weeks without depositing it because it was such a big deal. So, just to be really honest, right, there's lots of pressures that make you think about what the right path is. So I was not sure. I was really worried that I was taking a path that was disappointing. And not, I felt like you're given those opportunities, what are you supposed to do with them? But I feel like sometimes that nervousness, that fear, that insecurity, you gotta embrace it, right? You gotta go with it and try to distinguish what you feel is right from what it feels like everybody else is telling you. And again, when I got to Asian Americans Advancing Justice, we were tiny. I didn't have a computer. We needed someone to donate a computer to me at the time. We were in a church building where the elevators broke down all the time. And I was reaching out to people in the community, garment workers, for example, who had not thought about themselves as people who had any rights. And I was working really long hours. I was getting home in the middle of the night, and I had never been happier. I had never felt more like I was, and I hadn't even won any cases yet, It was just this sense of having a real purpose, and I think that was really important. And then, when I went into government, that was also a really tough decision, because I was gonna stay at Asian Americans Advancing Justice for 2 years. That was the length of my fellowship. And because of Stuart, because of donors who were willing to support the work, I ended up staying for 17 years. And at that point, Governor Jerry Brown was elected in California, and many people said, well, you should come into government. And these agencies, these government agencies that are not serving your community, that you keep complaining about, come in and fix it. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to be a community advocate. I want to be an activist. And I had to grapple with, if you can actually go do something from the inside, and you're not willing to, what does that look like? What does that mean? Mm-hmm. And so that's what brought me into government. I wasn't sure that was the right decision either. I actually had a lot of fear about that.
You don't know along the way, right?
That's
You have to take some risks, and sometimes...
just don't know.
Right?
You just don't know. And I went into government, and then, I'd never worked on a campaign even, and I ended up being the labor secretary in California, and then when Joe Biden was elected, he said, I want to address systemic racism in this country. I want to reverse the horrible things that the president before him, who was did, and I want to be the most pro-worker, pro-union president this country has ever seen, and I was like, sign me up for that.
Right. Okay, we're going to come back to that in a bit, but I'm going to shift gears to Mina, another activist in the Asian American community. So I mentioned before, Mina is a senior in high school, and she founded her organization at just 13, and I want you, Mina, to share with us in the audience here today, what led you to found this organization? What prompted you to decide that you were going to stand up and speak out? When you held your first rally, I read you thought there were going to be 50 or 70 people that were going to show up, and 1,200 people came out to support you. Just tell us a little bit more about that journey, what motivated you, and kind of what led you to form the organization that we know today as AAPI Youth Rising.
Yeah, I think that whole effort, it was really community-based effort, and we had, like, I don't know, I was able to incorporate all of my friends and teachers and community members in that effort, but I guess, like, the whole story was, so we were all kind of growing up. It was like 6th grade, the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden we were seeing all this uptick in Asian racism, even in the Bay Area, and I had considered it, like, I don't know, I was pretty young at the time, but I had considered it a pretty safe environment. Like, there was such a strong Asian presence. I had lived for a while in Southern California, so my entire life I had been surrounded by people who looked like me, which is really lucky. But we'd really considered it like kind of a safe haven in the Bay Area here. But then, the pandemic hit, and we saw all of these attacks springing up. Our elders in our communities were being attacked. There were incidents in like Oakland, NSF, Chinatown, and classmates saying hurtful things. Making jokes, like these side comments that all kind of built up into sort of a bigger spiral. And we were also frustrated because nobody was really talking about the incidents. I'm sure that you all can remember this, but there wasn't a lot of coverage going on in mainstream media and whatnot. And it was finally Amanda Nguyen who posted something, and then it finally gained some traction and recognition. But as Asian American youth, we were also frustrated because we felt like as youth, our voices weren't really being heard. Like, it was focusing on a lot of adult incidents, but we felt like a lot of this bullying and hatred was focused towards youth, and it was in schools and classrooms, and we really felt like we wanted to do something about it. So I had an idea to just like hang a sign over this like bridge that goes over this highway that I drive under or drove under every day to go to middle school. It started there, and then we got some Berkeley Council members to speak, and it sort of it came together in this big rally. And I think our rally happened around like 10 days also after the Atlanta spa shooting. So a lot of people really wanted to come out to support. I did not anticipate that level of support, but with the help of my friends, we were able to organize and get together, and from that we really realized that, maybe people do have some kind of interest in helping. Maybe people are willing to support, maybe maybe our community can be a place for us to gain power and do more things. So that was sort of the beginning of everything, and we wanted to keep acting from then on, so we sort of challenged issues with like Asian American representation in education and other projects like that. So that was kind of our beginning though.
And did you have a master plan from the beginning, or did you start figuring it out along the way? How did you transform something that could have just been a one-time event, right? A big rally, a lot of people come out, successful, but then how did you continue the momentum? How did you build that into an organization that has sustained time over the years?
If you told me where we were now at the time of organizing that rally, I would not have believed you at all. I would have been like, that's not going to happen, no. We really felt pushed after that day, after that rally, to do more, and it started with education. Like, in leading up to the rally and preparing for my speech and like writing and learning, like I was trying to learn more about Asian American history and like why we were at this place in the first point, and how it's really like these big historical cycles that keep repeating themselves over and over again. Like, what is the true root of all these stereotypes that we're facing, and why does it keep coming up over and over? In researching that, I kind of realized that the history was really a big piece and aspect that I hadn't seen. So we wanted to do more with that. We started with a pledge, just asking teachers if they would be willing to devote one day.
Tell us a little bit more about the 1-180 pledge.
Yeah, it was a pledge to ask teachers to just teach one day of API history out of the 180 days in the school year. We just went around to all our teachers at our middle school, at the places that we knew, those who we made connections with, and it kind of built up from there. And then we wanted to develop our own lesson for it, so kind of just built up from that, and we were able to reach out to other youth who were interested across the state in Southern California too, because at the time we were based in the Bay Area. And then, yeah, we just kind of got, I don't know, traction, and it just kept building, and it was only because of all the amazing organizations like the 1990 Institute that we were able to really build up this base of community support. But that's how we got going.
Great. And if anybody in the audience today is interested to become a member, I assume, approach Mina after the panel. Okay, I'm going to move to Stephen. So Stephen, you grew up in Fairbanks, Alaska, I heard. It's the second largest city in the state, I assume, after Anchorage, and has a population of 30,000 people. So 30,000 people, let's put that into context. San Mateo has a population of 100,000 people. San Jose has a population of 970,000 people. So 30,000 people, small town. And somehow you made it out of Alaska to attend Yale, studying physics. I mean, tell us a little bit about that. I mean, you're in Fairbanks growing up, you're Asian. 4% of the population identifies as Asian in Fairbanks. So it's 1,200 people. It's like basically this room times, 3. So, Stephen, tell us a little bit about your childhood and how you got to the first part of your career journey.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you for having me here, and I want to say thanks to all the youth in the audience for spending your Saturday with us. I think it's it shows a real maturity, and so I'm really impressed, and so thank you for being here. And I want you all to thank your parents who are here with you, for those that have your parents here with you who are supporting you, and both the youth and the parents. Please thank the educators out there in the audience. This is really an amazing community that the 1990 Institute has brought together, and I'm grateful to be a part of it. I grew up in Fairbanks, Alaska. You mentioned that by statistics, there were 1,200 people that identify as Asian in my town, although I don't know who those were. I don't recall that many. Certainly the experience of growing up in a very rural place, so 30,000 people, but then you add on to that you have to drive almost 100 miles to get to another town or village of like a few thousand people. And it really is, it's a small town, it's very remote. One of the amazing things about a place like that, though, is you really do get to know your community, and you get to know your neighbors, and you get to know people as individuals from all walks of life. As I think Grace mentioned with the cowboy experience, I was sitting and listening, I was like, oh yeah, that brought me right back to growing up and being of this stature. Next to, the economy in Alaska is a lot around, Fairbanks is a gold mining town. The economy, there's a lot of military, a lot of construction with the oil pipeline. And so for me to be standing next to people who were classmates who were 6 foot in high school, 200 plus pounds, and as an adolescent teen boy, that was very kind of a where am I? And certainly, of course, I think I'll share anecdotes like of my generation around that time. I mentioned a lot of military. So a lot of families that maybe had veterans who had served in Vietnam and so on. And so there were certainly incidents of racism directed at me. And I remember the first time I was like, well, but I'm not Vietnamese. And I was like, but I think I just missed that point, right? This is not appropriate. This is, and how is that making me feel and all of that. So as a young child experiencing that, and I'm sure we all have stories, there's certainly that, but in a small town you really get to know the community. And so for me, I really appreciated that opportunity to just be accepted as me, and kind of see how that felt and tried that on. A quick anecdote here. I was accepted. I had friends. I was the only Chinese person in my elementary school classes growing up, and by the time I got to high school, in my freshman year of high school, I thought, yeah, I would like to experience what it's like to kind of feel like I visually fit in and perhaps culturally fit in. And so I asked my parents, can I go and live with my uncle in Taiwan? So my sophomore year of high school, I moved to Taiwan, kind of a self-imposed year abroad, and I went to the Taipei American School. And my experience, I was searching for an opportunity to practice Mandarin. I was searching for the experience where, my height, the curve on of my legs, like everything just felt like I would feel like I fit in more. And I certainly got some of that experience. But then, as I got into I realized, wait a second, the folks at school who are Taiwanese and of Taiwanese background see me as other. And then the folks that I am closest friends with, who tended to be the more kind of mainland Chinese in Taiwan, who had spent time in the United States, I was closer friends with them, but then they viewed me as the American boy, right? They viewed me as the Alaska boy, the Nanook of the North, and do you live in an igloo, and all those things. And so I went to Taiwan looking for an experience where I would fit in, and I certainly got some of that. But then I also realized that even here, my first reaction is I don't fit in. But I think all of that, upon reflection, I came back to Fairbanks for my junior year of high school, and I was a completely different person junior year from freshman year. I was more confident, I was more comfortable in my own skin, I was more open and social and friends and all of that. And certainly part of that is just growing up, but I think a big part of that was just knowing who I was and knowing my stories and knowing my background and knowing that I was Chinese and having spent time in Taiwan and knowing, what that felt like and what that it was about. But also knowing that I was Alaskan and grew up in Alaska and what is that, and owning that part of my identity and knowing that I was American, et cetera, et cetera. And so I just encourage all of you to, as you said, connect with your stories, connect with who you are in your background. It doesn't mean that you are going to be like your parents, like you will be like where your roots come from. But I think if you really know your story, you'll be much more comfortable in your own skin. You'll be much more open to the world, and the world will be open to you.
Thanks, Stephen. Thank you. I think it's so interesting how each of you are talking about, reconnecting with your identity, reconnecting with your roots, and you don't need to don't need to go to Taiwan to do that, or China. You can certainly do it by attending events like this, meeting others in your community, meeting others within your school that have some shared interests around this, and really speaking to others like the people that you see in the room today about what their journeys were like, and reflecting on that. So I think it's just really interesting how each of you have done that at different points in your careers and your childhood even, and how that shaped you. I mean, do you have anything else that you want to share, Stephen, just in terms of how those early experiences then shaped how your career has unfolded over time?
Well, that's a great question. My parents, my father was a physicist. He was a professor at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. My mom got her master's degree in physics.
So it runs in the family.
Yeah.
Was there pressure to go study physics at Yale, which you did?
Yeah. In fact, I think my mom still thinks and hopes that I might get a PhD.
Right. Oh! Same.
Yes. Not kidding. But when I knew I was interested in science, I knew I was decent at math, and when I went to college, I said, I'm most interested in chemistry, but I deliberately went to a university that was kind of very broad and liberal arts. I did not want to go to a math and science focused school, and I was fortunate to get into a great university, and it worked out exactly as I wanted. I was maybe like in Alaska, where I was the only Asian person or Chinese person in my class. I was the only physics major in my dorm, but it was really important to me that I explored different areas of study. I reluctantly ended up back in physics because I was really trying to make sure that if I'm going to do physics, I'm going to do it because I want to do it, not because it's being expected of me. And so I think that is kind of very much related of, know what you are really interested in, why, and then go ahead and don't be afraid to pursue that. In my case, that step happened to be following in the path of what my parents had done. But as I mentioned with the grad school anecdote, from there I've taken that and made my own sets of choices, in different directions.
Great, thank you. Abigail, I'm going to pick up on this same theme about courage and taking a leap into the unknown. We mentioned earlier that you really left behind a lot of the prestige and stability of having a career in tech and venture capital and law, and then took this big leap into writing and film. And I know that you had been writing books on the side for a while, trying to get your footing there as an author, but it's still a big shift, and it can be very daunting. I think, especially for Asian Americans that were raised with very traditional expectations. So how did you manage that? What gave you that courage? Talk to us about, some of the decisions around that time that you were facing.
Well, I would say I didn't take a leap. It was definitely a gradual evolution. So my writing journey started, it's been like 17 years now, when I thought about being a law professor. And I just couldn't take that last step. I did everything to do. I clerked on the DC circuit. I'd won an award for my law review article as a student, and I was now practicing law at Sullivan and Cromwell in DC. And the next step would have been to write an article and go out on the market. And I just couldn't bring myself to write that article. And I felt like coming from me, it wasn't going to move the needle for society, and like 5 people would read it. But I was really excited about this fantasy novel that was swimming around in my head. It was a middle grade fantasy, and which kind of plays into The Veil now. And my husband was like, you're so excited, just try it. Like, just try writing it. And it was like telling someone, just try building a rocket ship. But I tried it, and it just came pouring out of me. And then I had some friends read it, and they read it overnight. And I was like, wow, there really is something here. And that was the first time I realized that I was creative. I did not know I was creative because I grew up, as you guys are familiar with, I grew up at a time when the stereotype was like, oh, I'm good at math and science. And I was good at math and science. I was also good at English and history, but the narrative was math and science, and so I just never thought I was a creative person. But it would take me from there 10 years, and I had 2 kids, and so when I moved to California with my husband's job, I took that time to take 3 years off to be under the radar, raise my kids, and then I wrote 2 novels in that time. And so I wrote my first middle grade, I wrote a young adult, and then I realized, okay, I'm not getting traction. You can't make a living like not getting traction with a book. So I did go back to law to finish out my practice, and desperately sent my novel out into the world to the agents. So while that was kind of going through the system, I was figuring out the law thing. And then I made my second big choice, which was to leave big law. I left the big corporate firm, and I went in-house to Intel Capital. I'd had a chance to visit it for 6 months as a secondment, and I loved the team. It was a really high-performing team. And I covered for a colleague, and it was a half-time job for me. And my boss at the time said, I know you want to write. Just because you're really fast and efficient doesn't mean you have to take on more work. You can take on just this job, because she wanted to keep me, and that was her way of
so you had the support of your manager at that time.
It was great. And so when she offered me the full-time job, it was a hard choice, because I knew, like, everyone was like, as you know, when you leave the big law firm, that's where all the big deals are done, the big boardroom meetings. That's like the sexy law. And then you go in-house, and they don't think you're really practicing law. But it ended up being a really great choice. I felt like I was retiring at the time, but then I got to be closer to the businesses. I got to see the startup companies incubating. At the time, the AI revolution was like, there were like 2,000 AI startups being pumped into the economy. And so I ended up being a lawyer thinking about all these AI issues, about safety and implicit bias that was being built into models, and just how powerful this technology was that was dual use. Like, so lip reading technology can be used for the hearing impaired, but can also be weaponized as a spy technology, and there was no one regulating them. So as a lawyer, I was thinking through these, and a lot of those stories ended up in The Veil. And so all those experiences that I had ended up becoming fodder for the stories that I tell, and I'm able to tell them through the story of like an Asian American family that they're inventors in Silicon Valley, and they happened to build this AI-generated virtual fantasy world. And so I wrote this in 2015, but it was too early for its time, and so I had to bury it. It never saw the light of day, never went to publishers, and so now I'm actually thrilled in 2025. People actually know what AI generation is, and I can bring this book into the world.
That's amazing. So ahead of its time, had to kind of keep it on the side, as you said, and now it's ready for its big debut. Amazing. Okay, I know that we're running a little bit behind on time, so I'm going to try to do a few quick questions, final questions for the panel, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So maybe just sort of one each to finish up here. Andrew, let's just talk a little bit about being an entrepreneur. You know, as an entrepreneur, you run into lots of setbacks, challenges. Give us a challenge that you faced that felt like a defining moment. What'd you do to overcome it?
Yeah. As an entrepreneur, a lot of the people say the skill set to be a good entrepreneur is to be a problem solver. So every day when you're starting in the early days of Boba Guys, it was as simple as like the light fixture would break, a toilet would break. So if you look at my signature in my email, like I actually say like co-founder and janitor. Because like I
No job is too small.
Yeah, no job too small. I like to say my team loves when I wash dishes because I'm really efficient washing dishes because I got disciplined a lot when I was young. And so I would say now I feel like the problems I think are cultural. So I'll kind of end maybe my part by saying this is that I love what 1990 does as kind of an entity, and the whole idea of as what a lot of us on this panel were saying is like this kind of like, I don't want to say third culture because I think that's also kind of its own thing, but I feel like sometimes I feel like both cultures. When I go to Asia, like I don't know, for me, like I feel very Asian and almost like, oh, that side of me was unlocked. And then when I'm in America, I'm like, oh, I'm very American, I'm outspoken, I'm expressive or something. And I think so much of what entrepreneurs have to do is kind of create our own destiny. So if you're a creator, if you're an entrepreneur, you create something from nothing. You have a vision, you have a story that does not exist prior to you, and your job is to get it out there. So a big decision, some of you guys might know in the pandemic, we created a new set of menu items if you go to any of our stores in San Francisco, New York, LA. And so remember, I'm doing things that have to be relevant on both coasts. And so there's this big debate on whether or not we would call an item if you know your Mandarin, like Teguanyin or Tikunyam, if you speak Cantonese. So my mom and dad are Kanto Mando. So there was a debate, and half my team, my executive team, is actually non-Asian. So they're like, well, why don't we just call it Iron Goddess? And this is during the time where this kid, Timothy Chalamet, was getting big. So I'm like, if you can say Timothy Chalamet, you can say Teguanyin.
Nice.
And so, like, I kind of forced that through, and I rarely try to make decisions like that authoritatively, but I was like, no. We're going to call it Teguanyin. We're going to put across every one of our menus. And if you look at our menu, we kind of created this larger decision of just really being more culturally focused and just owning who we are. Mm-hmm. So you'll see Teguanyin. If you're Filipino, we have a drink called Sapin Sapin. And like, we didn't say halo-halo drink, which is like a basic drink for Filipino kind of cuisine or desserts. Sapin Sapin is like a deeper cut. And so that kind of pivoted us more into these like situations where we own our culture. We have 20 plus stores, SF, New York, LA, which we call cultural hubs. We're like, well, if Starbucks is not going to do this, these overseas boba shops are not going to do it this way. They can't storytell as aggressively as us. Starbucks is never going to do the ethnic things correctly. Sorry, but they won't. And so, like, why don't we kind of own that positioning? And as a marketer, your job is to kind of find that positioning. So even in our handbook, we have another term where we teach these younger, like college, like Mina's age to college students a lot of times in retail. Look, we have a point of saying tsuku. So, sorry, it's not a Mandarin lesson, but it's a Saturday morning. That's when I took my Mandarin lessons. Or sikfu. So tsuku or sikfu. And what that means is it means eat bitter. And your parents are like, oh my God, Andrew's teaching you Chinese today. But it means delayed gratification. That's something Americans do not talk enough about. If you look at what's happening in Asia, especially China, like soft power, delayed gratification is not getting your rewards today. So if you eat something bitter, it's bitter. But tomorrow, like it might not be so, the sweetness will kind of kick in, but you're going to actually get the benefits and the health benefits because a lot of bitter foods are good for you. But we put that in our manual, right? So we have literally in like Chinese like characters like siku or sikfu, and we use this to explain the philosophy to mostly an American set of kids. Like 80% of our team, 90% of our team is like.
What's been the reception to that, Andrew?
I think now some of them are outside making you guys boba soon. I think they all kind of understand the way we do it. Again, this goes back into kind of what I started with was you have to be unapologetic, especially nowadays. You're not going to be heard if in this noisy world, this crazy world, if you kind of like are shy about who you are,
Yes.
no matter
Okay.
what identity.
Let's talk about being unapologetic. I'm going to ask Julie, what was it like when you were Secretary of Labor under Biden? You highlighted some of these stats to me. I think many of us, myself included, would not realize that there's actually only 15 cabinet secretaries in the entire country. When Julie was serving in President Biden's cabinet, she was 11th in line to succeed the president if there was an accident to the, right, 10 people above her. It's amazing. Tell us, what was that like as an Asian American woman?
Yeah. Well, there's so much to say about that, but I will take that specific question about being an Asian American woman in that kind of role because people don't expect it to be you, right? They don't expect it to be us. And I have so many examples of that, including, walking into the White House and people having to double take that I was a cabinet secretary after everyone else walked in. I had a security detail. When you're in the line of succession, you have a security detail that goes with you everywhere. And they actually had to change the way they operate because it was me. Now, a couple things on that. One is that they would go places before me just to check if it was safe, and they would say, the Secretary of Labor is coming. And people would always say, okay, tell us when he gets here. Yeah, and the he is not like, not he and not he, but right, they thought it was going to be a white guy. But also, the way, so we would always get on a plane. I didn't have to go through security to get on an airplane. I didn't actually, there's all these places in airports that I didn't know existed that you get to go through, and but we always got to go on first, and they would usually go on because they fly armed, and then I would get on. But they realized with me that they had to surround me because once they started to go on and I started to go on, other people in the airport were like, why is she getting on, right? So they never think that you're even the protectee. So I say all that because there's lots of ways that I think our world, our country is still not prepared for. I mean, I will keep saying like, sometimes people aren't ready for you yet. I felt like that a little bit in my role. And one reason why I think it's important for all of us to push each other, sometimes because it's your passion, you want to do it, but to be honest, sometimes it may not be your passion, you may not feel like you're ready, but we have to push those boundaries and change the way, the way people see things.
Thank you, Julie. I want to pick up on that and ask Stephen a question, related question, right? So Julie has worked in government her whole career, but you've worked in corporate. And there's a term that I've heard, and I'm sure you guys have heard as well, called the bamboo ceiling. Tell us, Stephen, as you're a successful Asian American executive, have you faced any barriers or unconscious biases in your career journey? And if so, do you have tips, feedback, recommendations for people in the room that might be, in that similar situation?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's certainly been incidents and anecdotes where I felt othered. In my first job out of college, I worked at a small consulting firm, about 50 people total, and I was there for 2 years. And I noticed a pattern of the senior partners, both two of them, that would misname me. They would call me David. Who was the other Asian guy in my class. And it was not, it
He didn't look like you.
No,
I assume.
no. But it was not, like there were no other signs, go work about the day, and that can happen. But after 2 years and repeated number of times, you just kind of feel like, it's not actively negative, but it's certainly not going to help.
Did
in
you
this
speak up?
situation. I did not. No, I did not.
If you were to give advice to your younger self, what would you say now?
Oh, you got to say something. You've got to say something. I was early. I was in my career. I was young. I wasn't, feeling that confident, and I let it pass. And from there, I was like, okay, there's a lot of other interesting opportunities out there in the world, and I found another firm.
You moved on.
Right. So I moved. I did not, as the people to my right and left, was not an activist in that sense. Later on in my career, I remember I was giving a presentation, trying to get approval for a deal, and I wanted to make sure that it was clear that we were going to try to mitigate the risks of this deal, and we were going to monitor this and do that. And the senior executive, like 6 levels above me, huge difference in power, just interrupted right in the middle and said, "Who's we? You need to say I." And I just froze. I didn't say anything. I froze. And I was like, I will make sure that, we do this and we do that. And I felt, again, very othered. I felt like I'm saying we because it's inclusive, because I'm not trying to put myself above the people that I will be working with to actually make this happen. I understood the other point, right? But it just said to me, like, okay, there's a difference of perspective, there's a difference of background. I certainly wouldn't have called out someone more junior in that way, in that moment, and so maybe there was some insensitivity there. But that just made me think about, there are different perspectives. As I've progressed in my career, and again, I'm not an activist, but something that I've really found to work for me is to recognize that we all have some privileges. Of course, in the United States, there's privileges that accrue to, whiteness and maleness and so on, and that's part of the culture. But I've learned that we all do have some privileges. I think you mentioned Asian excellence. When I walk into a room, especially when I was younger, I would get the benefit of the doubt that he's probably smart and he probably knows math, right?
But can you play piano and violin?
I'm not saying that it happened to be true to degrees, but we all have some privileges. When I'm now at work, I try to take an effort to host Boba parties, right? And to have like a Harvest Moon Festival, like happy hour, and to bring people together around things that matter to me. And that allows me to connect with other folks that are of Asian heritage in ways that if I were a white male, I wouldn't have that opportunity to do. And I also can use that to connect with people who are not of Asian heritage but are interested, right? And so we do all have some privileges. I think we should each think about what those are. Growing up here in the Bay Area comes with its privileges. And whatever groups, whoever you are, there are groups and people that you can connect with. And together we can kind of work together. We can lift each other up. We can start to shift and bend the long arc of history towards justice.
Great. I'm going to direct the last question for the panel to Mina. Mina, you've spoken up since a young age, and have had the benefit of gaining all of this experience in this community over the last number of years. What advice do you have for the students in the room? What would be your sort of parting words for those that, also want to take part in either advocacy efforts or supporting the Asian American community and finding their own identity?
I think my biggest piece of advice would just be to listen. I think that in my own advocacy journey, we really started seeing real change when we were able to listen to our communities and also learn more about AAPI history, hear more about advocates before us, learn more about the civil rights movement, learn more about American history. I think it's really important to know our histories overall, so that would be my first piece of advice. And then my second piece of advice, which is also still to listen, but also to try to listen to people with different perspectives from your own. Last summer, I had a really great opportunity to go to this thing called California Boys and Girls State. And if you are currently a junior, I would definitely recommend applying, but basically they send like 1,000 kids from all over California and they all come together. And you know, I was there and I was interacting with a lot of people who I wouldn't necessarily agree with, like a lot of people who are on, the opposite side as me in the past 2024 election. A lot of people who like had all these views and perspectives that I couldn't even comprehend at the time. But it was really good to just kind of hear out their perspectives and get to talk to them and get to learn from who they are. I think that right now it's a really, really polarizing time. We have a lot of fear, we have a lot of worry, and a lot of that is based in there are actual threats out there in regards to immigration, all kinds of other things. But there's also just a lot of like, I feel like animosity kind of building, and we are not going to see any kind of solution. We're not going to see an end to the scapegoating of immigrant communities, scapegoating of minority people if we don't like come to some kind of common ground, and if we don't have the capacity to listen to other people, to speak with other people who have different opinions from our own. So yeah, my biggest piece of advice would just be to listen in all kinds of regards, to try to take in as much information as possible, and still like assert your own opinions, like have your own strengths, like assert your will, but at the same time like listen to everyone. Yeah.
Powerful words. Thank you, Nina. Okay, that ends the moderated section of our panel. Do we still have some time for live Q&A? I think so. Well, anybody have a question from the audience that you'd like to direct to the panelists? You can either direct to the full panel or a specific person. Just raise your hand or come up to the mic. Yes, come on up.
Hi, good morning. Hi, good morning. My name is Chris. I'm from Little Woodin High School. I'm an educator. You all have been talking about privilege, about power, about coalition building. This question is for Julie and for anyone else on the panel. So I know that a lot of the work that you do is advocacy work for all different groups in our country. It is certainly a time of a lot of division and hate. And I know you've done work there. I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about why you advocate for the Black community, why you advocate for the Latinx community, and why that is beneficial to all people in the United States when you do that?
Well, thank you very much, Chris, for that. I fundamentally think that there is no way for our community to rise if all communities do not rise. I think that the same forces, the same forces that we've talked about here, whether it's in our individual experiences or as a whole, about exclusion and racism and who belongs and who doesn't, is about power. And it's about people in power wanting to maintain that power and wanting to maintain it exclusively. And I think what we're seeing right now, just to try to make this answer fairly short, right now in our country, we see the perils of not having strong alliances and a holistic view about what justice means, which is that those who would try to hang on to power with all they've got are going to use other divisions to make us more interested in fighting each other than in actually thinking about what's good for everybody. And I do fundamentally also believe that there is no reason why, just to talk about the United States of America, we are not talking about, thinking about, and working toward a place where everybody gets a good life. There's no reason why we cannot have that, other than that people who want power for just a few are going to tell us that we cannot. And so the way to do that is to make it better for everybody, right? Not to figure out who's other and who's, sorry, I'm just going to say something really political just for one moment. We have a criminal in the White House who's talking to us about crime, right? And who is saying that while while billionaires in this country steal from the rest of us, that somehow we need to be policed. I think that is deeply, deeply problematic on a whole bunch of levels. And so if we allow certain people to be the criminals in our minds, then we play into that.
Thank you. Next question.
My name's Karen, she, they pronouns. I actually work in East Bay with Elevate Youth California and Systems Impacted Youth. So my question, as someone who grew up in San Francisco, worked in San Mateo County, now works in the East Bay, there's a lot of intersection of socioeconomic status, the way in which we immigrated to the United States, and the environments that we have the privileges of growing up in. Hello? Okay.
There we go.
I used to work in classrooms, so I was like, I can project. So primarily I wanted to kind of ask anyone on the panel, how does generational wealth and these privileges contribute to the successes that you have been able to accomplish? I work with a lot of Southeast Asian communities, a lot of communities who are currently being taken by ICE, and so that's a very different landscape than, say, if you're middle, upper class, kind of living in certain different parts of the cities or in the Central Valley or on the coast. So I was kind of curious from y'all's perspectives and y'all life experiences, how generational wealth and these privileges have affected your ability to succeed and the opportunities that you have before you, and how other people can position themselves to seek out these opportunities if they're not readily available to them the way that they have been to you.
Who from the panel would like to take that question? Abigail,
I'll take it
all
because
right.
no one else is taking it. My parents were from opposite ends of the spectrum. My father was dirt poor in Indonesia. His father had left China to try to make money for the family, and he was sent from Indonesia to the United States for the same reasons when he was 13 years old. He was never able to see his mother again, and she passed away because of a bunch of restrictions around immigration. He could never go back to see her until he became a citizen the year she passed away, so he just missed her. So he is really a self-made man, and when I hear about his childhood growing up in Michigan at 13 plus, he went to high school, he was arrested at one point, and he had to do community service, and there were all these things that I'm amazed that he got through that. But then he met my mother. My mother came from a really wealthy family in the Philippines, but she was number 11, so she did not actually learn anything about how to be a wealthy family, except that she was in a position of privilege. And so it was a very interesting dynamic within my own home of class. And I think what I hear from others who kind of grow up in similarly, I know someone who's actually, they're African royalty. They don't have the wealth, but they have that memory, that family memory of being in these positions of wealth and privilege. And the difference actually is actually a mindset. They have a privilege, they have a sense of entitlement. I am entitled to people, I'm entitled to have desires and people will carry them out, or that people will do what I want and that I can make things happen. And I actually think that's the more powerful thing about that legacy that anybody can take on, regardless of what your upbringing is. But it is a mindset, it is a training, and it's something that we can learn about together.
Thank you. Okay, next question.
Testing. Okay, I guess I got lucky with the mic here, but yeah, once again, I wanted to thank all the speakers for coming here. It's been super inspiring hearing about all your stories and sort of how you've grown up and have really broken away from that traditional Asian mold, right? The idea, as Andrew was saying, about Asian excellence, going to Berkeley, going to Stanford, and then really following your passion and doing your own thing. But I know we have basically the next generation of Asian leaders in this room, and alongside of them, a lot of their parents who have been supporting them along the way. What I'm really curious, though, is if any of you have suggestions on how their parents can really help them, encourage them to break the mold, right? Rather than fitting in with the status quo, how they can, grab onto that hunger that they have to make change in this world. So I'd love to hear any of your suggestions for that.
Great question.
I'll make this one really short. I think if there's one thing about parents, because I have a really young team, and I meet a lot of the parents they have a reputation for being very kind of like type A and tough, and so the parents love sending them to work at Boba Guys because of just how we kind of like drill things into people, and I think I'm unapologetic about it. So it's how we got here. So I think at the end of the day, it's a balance. So I think in America, we think of extremes. We think of that's a great question, because the answer, I think, is usually when an answer is really complicated, it means the question is really good. So in this case, America sees things as polarized. It's very black and white, right? And if you kind of study kind of East Asian philosophy, it's actually the almost opposite. Everything is about the harmony. Everything's both yin and yang. And, you know, I spent a lot of my time overseas, and I feel like we teach too much of this extreme of like, you gotta be this or that. You have to like, it's hot or cold. And I tell people at my team, it's like a physical example where people ask, how come there's so many people who don't want ice in their drinks? You don't actually think about it. But if you actually know the real reason, does anybody know, right? Culturally? You get cold, yeah? And then it ruins your chi, right? Like you want it a little bit more lukewarm. But it's not because, oh, it's too freezing or it's too hot. It's more about it'll ruin kind of your flow and your chi. But an American would never think about that, never. And so, you know, I think at the end of the day, if you were to kind of think about your kids, I always tell them, make sure that they're kind of harmonized, make sure they're balanced. So for the kids who's super academic, who's pushed too much, like I think you want to give them some freedom. And for the kid who probably needs a little bit more of motivation, like send them work for Boba guys. I'm just kidding. Like push them hard. Make sure that they understand like what it's like to strive and have strong work ethic, which I think is also something that we are starting to lose in America. And so I think the combination, it's not black and white. And there's something that I don't think we all talked about, which I'm pretty outspoken about, is mental health. In the Pacific, on this side, thanks. I'm glad that actually people even respond to that positively, because a decade ago when I was growing up, I have bad anxiety. I've talked about it online, and I've had a lot of founders, they struggle with mental health because of just the burden and the pressure. And if there's one thing the parents could do a little bit is also, you don't have to say the word mental health, but like understand that there are certain pressures, whether it's the kid's fault or not, that's induced by social media and by the way schools are, how scary schools are with gun control issues here now. All that put together, these things are kind of unspoken, I think play a part in how I think your kid's gonna adapt to things and strive for things. So make sure you're very aware of that too.
Okay, thanks. I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to cut off the Q&A at this point. I know that we're running way behind time.
No more
so
questions.
I just want to give another just warm thank you to the panelists here, Andrew, Mina, Stephen, Julie, Abigail. Thank you for sharing your journeys with us. You've given us, I think, a lot more than just inspiration. You've given a blueprint for courage, for impact, and really for staying true to who we are, even when the path isn't clear. So as we move into the rest of today's program, I really invite you to carry forward the themes that we've explored this morning. You're going to hear a lot more in the breakout sessions later this morning and this afternoon, and just really let it be the beginning of deeper conversations, collaborations, and the bold ideas that are going to reflect the world that you want to shape. So on behalf of the 1990 Institute, thank you again, and let's keep the conversation going. All right, one final round of applause.